So welcome to the Happy Mindset Podcast. Today's episode is episode number 57, and today I'm joined by Pennie. So Brian is originally from Dublin. He is a speaker, a writer, a PhD student, a self-development coach, and a university lecturer. Today, Brian is on the podcast to highlight how change is possible, because Brian was also a heroin addict for 15 years. So on today's podcast, we're talking about how he went through that experience and how he grew from it. We talk about how his issue wasn't the heroin, it was his overthinking habit. Brian is very open and honest in the podcast about the stuff he's gone through and the lessons that he's learned. He talks a little bit about mental models as well, which is something I'm quite fascinated about. It helps you to understand the world better, to think about the world in ways that empowers you. So I hope you enjoy today's episode, and I hope you get a lot of value from Brian. His story is a story that really has inspired me, and it has showed me that change is possible for anyone. So thanks again for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for taking the time out today, Brian, and joining us to talk on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Dennis. Really excited to be here.
My pleasure. So my first question is, who are you, Brian, and what are you doing in the world today?
Who am I and what am I doing in the world today? I remember being asked this question, I won't say his name. It was around he was a facilitator in an aftercare program I was in, and I had no sense of my emotions or how emotions were. So he was very right on a lot of questions. But I met him since, and he asked me a question of who am I? And I remember saying to him that you can't know who you are. You can only know who you aren't. You can only really subtract away, because it's like what we had a little chat before this, Dennis, and it's like if you say who you are, you're already identifying with a self-concept. So it's a very, very dangerous way to go. So it's nearly it's the Oracle at Delphi or something like that. I forget the statement now. It used to always be in my head, but I think it's very dangerous really to go to label who you are, because it'd be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you're going to be locked tunnel vision into that self of who you are. So I like to talk about who I'm not, or subtract away from things like that. And I suppose a quick answer to your question of, let's say, in a more colloquial way of talking about it is, and what I'm doing right now. And I'll try not to label myself too much, but I would call myself somebody that is trying to figure out the world and trying to build self-awareness. And through my experience that I've had, I'm really just trying to help people in the world. So at the moment, I'm doing a PhD, and I'm doing a lot of speaking gigs around Dublin, around the country and stuff like that at the moment. And it really all stems from me story and me history and the experiences that I went through. So it started off for me, I was in addiction for a long time. I was a heroin addict for 15 years. And something I do like to say to people is that heroin and drugs were not my problem, not even slightly, in the slightest. It wasn't the issue whatsoever. My problem has always been overthinking and anxiety. I'm actually doing a lot of writing about that at the moment, and I'm really going into the depths of that, and it's even coming out more as I go into my childhood, and I'm writing about my childhood and all. I was always consumed by my mind and consumed by anxiety, and that really defined my life of addiction. I used that as a way to escape reality, I suppose. And I spent 15 years in addiction, and 5.5 years ago, 6 years ago, on the 8th of October coming up, I finally went into detox, and I had a complete shift in perspective, and I seen the world completely differently. So very grateful for that. We can go into a little bit more detail on that if you choose to later on. But I suppose what happened was my mind went quiet. Through that, anxiety left me, and I've never really looked back. And something that we touched on before as well, before the podcast, was I just became addicted, you could say, addicted to learning. Addicted is probably the wrong word. I just became absorbed in our abilities, that we can learn anything, and the world is out there, that we can go and do anything if we put our minds to it. So since then, I'm doing a PhD now, and I'm really just I've learned a lot of tools, and I've hacked isn't a word I completely love, but I really just, let's use hacked for the sake of it. I've hacked tools for life, tactics for life, habits for life, of how to live a better life. And I've probably spent the best part of the last 3 years really developing a program for life of tools that work for me. And I'm just sharing them through me talks and through me writing. And that's in a nutshell how I'd talk about myself at the moment. Showing people that change is possible. That's my mission. I have to get that in.
Mission. So take us back to like when your mind went quiet and your rock bottom experience. Like what can you explain that a bit more? Like what was that sensation like? And just what was that sensation like? How did you know that your mind had just gone quiet all of a sudden?
Right. It's a two-pronged attack or whatever way you put that is. But I had I call it the most painful night of my life, but also the most important night of my life. And it happened when I was 2 days into my own home detox. And I woke up in my sitting room and I was covered in blood. I'd actually had a convulsive seizure and I drove my teeth through into my tongue. Like, it was a horrific experience. I ended up in hospital. And I remember, I won't go into the depths of that night. I've written about it. I speak about it a lot. But I remember just, I thought it was brain damaged at one stage. And it was like language wasn't making sense. It was like, I remember actually looking at a fire extinguisher. That was the moment. I remember looking at this red fire extinguisher and it didn't make sense to me. It wasn't like a red fire extinguisher. It was like just these singular words like red fire extinguisher. And I remember looking around the room and it was like these sentences or statements or propositions that used to sit together didn't make sense anymore. And I remember thinking, oh my God, you're brain damaged. And for me, that would have sent the old me into a panic. Like, I was always anxious all my life. And I remember it's ingrained in my brain in the hospital. I remember just saying, oh, I quit. I've no more fight. I give up. I didn't realize that at the time, but I think that was the start. That was like the crack in the ego for me of just like getting rid of my old identity of who I thought I was, the person that protected me, my addiction with my life. And when I was 5 weeks later, I got into the detox center and I done another 5 weeks getting off opiates in there. And when I was 2 days clean then, I think the fire extinguisher incident, or that incident of where I gave up, that set the tone for what was going to happen. But when I was 2 days clean, and it wasn't like this big boom, one moment. It was more like a couple of moments. But there was one day in particular. I say 2 days clean. I think it was 2 days clean. There was a day or two in and around that time, really, to talk about it from a language perspective. I name it as 2 days. But I remember on one incident in particular, I was sitting outside. I was on the detox facility, was on a farm. And I remember I was sitting outside on a fence in the morning. We used to get up in the morning, we'd do a bit of cleaning and stuff like that in the detox center. And I would finish the cleaning and we were waiting for breakfast and I was sitting outside on a fence. And I remember it was beautiful. The month or the 6 weeks I was in detox, it was October, but it was beautiful. It was always really sunny and pretty warm actually as well. And I was out on the fence and it was really one of these dewy mornings. Like the grass was like saturated even though it wasn't raining. And I remember sitting on the fence and the cat that's part of the residential centre or part of the detox centre, Molly her name is, she crawled up my leg. And I remember her claws digging into my leg. It was just like I was feeling things like my sensory experiences just exploded. I remember the sun coming up through the trees and it was autumn time, so it was sort of crackling through the branches of the trees. There wasn't really many leaves. And I remember just thinking, wow, that is just amazing looking. And I remember the mist on my skin. It was a misty atmosphere that morning and the noises of the birds. And I remember just saying, oh my God, I just felt like so alive. And I remember even after that, we went in and started eating the breakfast. The food was delicious in there. And I remember the food just tasted amazing. And when my mind went quiet for me, it's like, it's very hard to describe the experience of my mind going quiet. What I can only describe is the sensory experiences that came into my life. And I just felt I was just mesmerized by sensory experiences. And it was like by my mind going quiet, it was like a yo-yo effect or a seesaw effect. Sensory experiences were just stronger and stronger. And just this energy and glow came into my life. A nice way of describing it would be, Dennis, was like things that used to be hollow. I used to look at things and life was hollow. But now life was just full of depth. And I suppose that's when I realized that my mind went quiet. And the very specific moment that I realized that my mind was quiet, because I didn't realize while my mind was consumed by me inner voice and me self-talk, I didn't actually realize it. I was drowned by it. I often say I was like a fish swimming around the ocean looking for water. It was everywhere, but I didn't know it was there. I couldn't see it. But I remember being introduced to mindfulness meditation while I was in that detox facility. And the meditation we were doing was observe your thoughts. And I remember saying, oh my God, where's my thoughts? And the thoughts that used to consume me, that race in mind, they just weren't there. And I was saying, wow, is this what's after happening to me? Is my thoughts after going quiet? And that was really the one realization I had, that was it. And I'm still, to be quite honest, that's what my PhD is shaped around at the moment, is looking at the relationship between emotions, anxiety, language, self-talk. But I'm really sort of studying that at the moment. But that's about the best description I can give of it, of when my mind went quiet.
And so when did the passion for learning come in? Did it come in quite quickly after that?
Immediately, absolutely immediately. I remember a girl called Johanna Ivers. I'm actually doing research with her at the moment. She got me to lecture. I'm a lecturer. I do lecturing in Trinity College as well now with the neuroscience of addiction. So she came into the facility to do a study on people coming off methadone in an fMRI machine. And when she was chatting to me, I'd already experienced this love for learning. I remember Natalie was the name of the woman that was the clinical psychologist, or she was the clinical psychologist in the detox facility, and she was telling us about Johari's window, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I was just consumed by this knowledge. I'm saying, why? And I read a spiritual book while I was in there called what was it? It's not actually a brilliant book. It's a good book, but it's not one I'd recommend now. But it was my introduction to spiritual concepts. It was called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. And it was like this way of living. And he used the metaphor of a garden. The garden is like you feed your mind with good stuff, like with spiritual stuff, meditation, good food, exercise. And that's like the garden. So you feed your garden good food, good nourishment. But worry and all these different things are like weeds for the garden, like negativity for a poison for your soul. And I remember just saying, oh my God, all I filled my mind with was poison for my soul. Now I'm only going to give it nourish my garden as such. And I remember Natalie was teaching us all this stuff, and I'd started to translate. Like, I was in detox to get off a 15-year heroin addiction, but I was started treating it like a curriculum. So when Johanna was bringing me to St. James's, I was only a couple of days off methadone, and she was bringing me into St. James's to do an FRMI machine. And I remember saying to Natalie, can you get someone to take notes so I don't miss any of the curriculum? So she would laugh and say, no one's ever come in here before and been worried about missing the curriculum. So something, even though it sounds funny and there was a bit of a madness around that, like I was a bit crazy. Like even when I got out of detox, I was saying to my family, "Do you ever taste strawberries? Like really taste strawberries?" And of course people had, but it was like I was putting my egotistical experiences into other people. So there was a madness to it, but a beauty to it at the same time. It was like I was seeing everything with new eyes again. And that's where my addiction to learn. I'm saying addiction a lot, and it probably was an addiction because I still love learning. And you could say I'm addicted to learning, but it's positive stuff, you know.
How did you start curbing back the madness? As in, like, you were very excited, obviously, because of the new experience for you. How did you start curbing it back and being more grounded, I guess?
That's a good question, and I would say that I didn't do it. It's just something that happened over time. When I went to, after detox, I went to a treatment facility and it's called Ashery down in Wexford. And I went in there, and I remember the priest in there, Father Jim, his name is, we just call him Father Jim, an amazing man. And he actually introduced me to Anthony DeMello, the book Awareness I was talking about earlier. And he started with saying that it's not an addiction center. You don't have to go to an addiction center. What you have to go to is an awareness center. It's all about building awareness. And for me, I remember he was saying it to me because I had a really rancid drug use, and I really polluted my mind, twisted my mind with delusion, and I really twisted my mind in a way that I could believe my own lies so I could live with myself. So I remember him saying to me, it'll probably be 5 years before you'll really be starting to see true recovery, or you'll start seeing it over them 5 years. And I have to say he was really right. Like when I got out, I didn't only start playing golf. I started playing golf 15 times a week or 10 times a week, crazy amounts of golf. I was eating healthy food, but I was eating like a plate of sprouts and like really mad behavior, but all in the right direction. And I was only, my family laughed at that, like I was mad as a brush, but on the right track, and I wasn't using drugs, so that was great. But I suppose the more I introduced meditation into my life, mindfulness into my life, the more I interacted with people in the real world, interacted with people that weren't addicted and didn't twist their mind around. But most people into the modern society are lacking awareness as well because of the way society is set up. And I would say it just happened over time. I would say it started diluting itself to an extent over the course of the first 6 months to a year. And it's slowly over time. Like, I think I was only talking to my sister the other day, and she was saying, like, do you remember last year you were doing that? I was saying, oh yeah, oh my God, that was a bit weird. So I'm sure in a year's time I might be looking at a few odd behaviours again, but it's all funny. I take it in jest. It's something important in my recovery as well is that I'm very easily able to laugh at myself. I don't take myself very seriously, and I think that's very, very important.
Did you always have that once you had that kind of clear mind, once you reached that rock bottom, or is it something that has grown over time, the ability like to laugh at yourself and see through things?
I always had it. I dare say I maybe even had it to an extent before I was an addict. I was always had a jovial attitude. I always had like even when I was in addiction, I was sort of a likable. It's not very big-headed saying that, but I was always a likable character. People seemed to like me. I was always a happy kind of person until I got very deep into my addiction, and then it just turned to madness. But I was always sort of a happy-go-lucky kind of a person. But definitely as I got into addiction, I didn't take myself very seriously. But the more I practiced tools and tactics with myself and life lessons that I've learned, I've built on that even more so. A quote that I used, actually created a video and talked about it last week, and a video I created was, be true to your wonderfully weird self. You'll attract what you need and repel what you don't. And that mantra in life is probably the most important mantra in my life. And it just gives me permission to be me. Weirdness and all. And the thing is, if I'm being completely true to myself, whoever that is, it's funny enough, it's a question you asked at the very start, whoever that is, if I'm being true to who I am, being as honest as I can, being as aware as I can, and there's quirks in that, if I am that person, I feel comfortable, and then the right people will be attracted to that person. So then they won't be wasting their time. I won't be wasting my time. And it's just something that really works for me. I got great advice there last week on that as well by a guy called Derek Sivers, a brilliant guy from the States. Like he's one of my heroes. And I reached out through email, and he gave me a lot of time through email, which was amazing. And he was sort of saying, yeah, that's a great way to polarize, was the way he put it, polarize yourself in that way. But he says, you need to be a bit careful as well, so you're not too naive, especially if you're looking to climb the ladder, let's say, in the business world, or let's say I'm going to be an entrepreneur for myself to an extent of building my brand to share my message with the world. He says, but maybe when you're dealing with people that are very clever, very smart, and are in it for different reasons, I might just have to curb that to an extent, just not to be too naive so people can take advantage of me. But I'm going to try my best to be as true to my weird self as I can.
That's actually a good question. Like, how do you find that balance between not being taken advantage of, being too naive, and actually still being your real self?
Yeah, what I've said to that in the past when people have asked me that, I don't think anyone's actually asked me. I think it's a question I journaled on myself. And I was sort of saying, if I get burned by 5% of people on the way up as I'm going along, if I get burned by 5%, I've said, is it worth it getting burned that amount of time if it gives me so much freedom in the rest of my life? Now, I could have an instance in my life going forward where I get burned so bad, I might change that way of thinking. But at the moment, it's working for me so well. Like, I reached out last year to some of the most successful CEOs in Ireland and some really famous people in Ireland. Like, on an interview with Dara O'Brien there not so long ago, and Amy Huberman, just by using this tactic and being me, the email I used to reach out to people was, I'm a ridiculously enthusiastic learner, which I am. And people seem to like that, and just being very, very true to myself. So I got great interviews, and I'm even being mentored by some of the top CEOs in Ireland by being completely true to myself. And that's how I got my speaking career was launched as well. So it's worked for me so well that I'm willing to get burned for the moment. But in the back of my mind, very clever people, the likes of Derek Sivers, has said that to me. So I will keep it in the back of my mind just to be, I suppose, touch me toe in certain situations. The gut always tells you, if I feel something and I say, right, I better just tread carefully here. I'll be myself, but I better tread carefully. And that's probably the way I'll manage that going forward in the future. Listen to the gut. Yeah.
That's good advice. What I'm curious about is the label that you've touched on this already about the addiction, instead of being an addiction center, an awareness center. So, like, how did you see the effect that labels had in your life when you were in the addiction, when you were addicted to heroin? What did you believe about yourself that you see in retrospect now that it was complete bullshit?
This is a funny one as well, because, and it could be a key component of why I don't have as much shame. And there's a lot of labels associated with addiction. People saying they have a lot of shame in their life, they have a lot of lacking self-worth in their life, lacking belief in their life. And a core component of my addiction was that I didn't believe I was an addict. I wasn't like the other addicts, in inverted commas. I used to say I'm not like other. I used to go on holidays. I am different or whatever. And I used to have this thing that I'm different. And even when I did think of myself as an addict, I used to think of myself, I'm a great addict. I always get money and I always get me drugs, which I did. So I never lost my belief in myself, which was pretty strange. Now, near the end, that all started to change, but I was pretty much asleep all the time, and I was comatose with the amount of drugs in my system. So I had a complete lack of memory and lack of awareness around all that kind of stuff. But in the area of my addiction, where I can remember stuff of where I really would have labeling myself, I didn't label myself in a negative way as an addict, because I genuinely didn't believe it. That was the only way I could really have lived with myself. Like, even I've since done research in my old clinic where I used to get my methadone. And I remember the counsellor in there said, I walked up to the methadone clinic and I actually says, I'm looking for a methadone clinic for a non-addict. Like, this was the belief system I had. I spent 12 years after that giving a urine every single week to see what was in my system, going to the chemist several days a week to collect me methadone, and I still didn't believe I was a real addict. I thought all other addicts out there were doing much worse things than me and were taking more drugs than me. So I really twisted my mind to divert myself away. I suppose I was protecting myself from the labels. In hindsight, I've never really thought about it like that. I think I was protecting myself from dangerous labels in case I start believing them. Maybe that's what I was doing. Maybe my subconscious was protecting me to a certain extent. But if I did put any label on myself, the label I would have put on myself would have been, it was all centered around me anxiety. And it was really like, I used to say, so for me, it was always the addiction was a symptom of the underlying problem, which was me busy mind and anxiety. So I didn't think or label myself as having anxiety. I labeled myself as having royal anxiety. Anxiety that was much worse than anyone else's. And because it was so bad, I needed to do drugs more than anyone else. And it was the label I put on anxiety and the link of it with myself that I had this special anxiety, which was ridiculous when you think about it. That's the label I put myself, and that's the label that really restricted me. And it didn't restrict me to the extent that that there was a stigma around it in any which way, because I just used drugs to cope with that. But I suppose the disassociation, because I don't suffer with anxiety anymore, maybe that's a reason, and that's a reason why I feel so well in myself now, and the stigma isn't there, because anxiety just left me. So it's really, the labeling for me was around the anxiety, and once that left me, then drugs were no longer a problem. Like, it's like I've never wanted to use drugs since I got clean. Like, you just don't appeal to me because the anxiety left me.
Interesting. Do you think that the identification with the anxiety made it worse?
Yeah, definitely. It was, yeah, 100%. It was, I made it into a monster. I was anxiety, and it's nearly like, my main practice now, like, I practice meditation, I practice mindfulness, but the core practice of my, mindfulness, meditation practice would be self-observation. So what I do is I mindfully observe my thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations. My anxiety, I'm still calling my anxiety for linguistic stakes, descriptive sake of describing it, was basically around my bodily sensations, around my chest. And I had a lot of trauma as a baby as well. I had a big operation. I nearly died as a baby. And I'm writing a book at the moment, and I'm going into the depths of that at the moment. And there's some horrific stories of what was done to me by the doctors. Now, they had to do it to save me life, but they were jabbing needles into me head to keep me alive and all this kind of stuff, crazy stuff. And a lot of my problems around anxiety was bodily sensations. Even now, to this day, even though anxiety, I don't suffer with anxiety anymore, I still get agitated when I think of my heartbeat and bodily sensations and blood flowing through my body. And I think that all stems from trauma in my childhood. But the anxiety for me. So what I do is if I'm doing a public talk or I'm doing something that would cause natural anxiety, I feel the anxiety building up my body and I just mindfully observe it. And what I'm doing there is, whereas I used to say I am anxiety, or I believed I was anxiety, myself was embedded within that anxiety, I view anxiety and bodily sensations and thoughts around that as something I can observe, something that comes, something that passes. It's not who I am. It's something I observe. The metaphor I use for it to help me to get concrete on the thinking would be, I'm the blue sky observing the clouds. Sometimes the clouds are dark and angry, like anxious, but sometimes they're bright and fluffy where I just feel great. But they will always come, they will always go. But I'm the blue sky who observes the anxiety without engaging. So I create a space between me and anxiety, so that label, that disassociation stays where it is, and this works phenomenally well for me. It really does.
That's good. So yeah, you've distance. So you're like, yeah, I think the key is like, it's the emotions you act on. They're the ones that actually make a difference. But when you're aware of the emotions, you don't let them over control you. And you've got the space to act on the emotions you want to act on. It's not always easy, but like, that's it.
No. And I would say in certain situations it's nearly impossible, and you can't change your mindset to act that way. It's the preemptive measures that you put in place. Like, I meditate every single day. I don't do loads of meditation. I meditate for 10 minutes in the morning, 6 to 12 minutes in the morning. Depends on the day. It depends on what guided meditation I pick, or if I pick a timer. And I'd meditate for 6 to 12 minutes in the evening. But it's the years of putting that little daily meditative practices in, and they cue me to be more aware during the day. And it's that daily practice that when triggers come up, problematic triggers come up, that space has been built beforehand, so I can catch my emotions in the moment and have an opportunity to not act on them. It's nearly what I say is I'm practicing non-reactivity rather than, so you respond instead of reacting, because it's a more rational approach, because that space is there.
Can you talk a little bit about the power of compounding action, daily action in your own life?
Yeah. No one's ever asked me that question before, and I love it. Compounding daily action, I think, I always say that self-awareness, I often say, and it depends on the talk, I'll say self-awareness is the holy grail. And then what I'll say is, I don't say consistency is the holy grail, but it could be as well, but there can only be one holy grail. But for me, self-awareness has to come first, because without self-awareness, nothing is going to work. No actions are going to happen, so nothing can actually compound. But for me, I'd say to people that if I had 3 words for anyone, it's consistency. And what comes around to that is consistency every day. I practice mindfulness every day to build self-awareness, to be more consistent. But it's then compounding actions that's where the goal is in them compounding actions. I noticed not so long ago, when it was through compounding actions, through meditation and through questioning myself, journaling, all the practicing gratitude, practicing visualization techniques, and really practicing positivity, practicing a positive mindset. And I remember a thought came into my head. It must be about 8 months ago now, and it was something that should have troubled me. I remember thinking, that's something that should really trouble me. Like, that should be worrisome. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, can I not even worry anymore? No, I can. I've had other things in the past that I can worry, but I was like, I don't think I can even worry about things that used to worry me. Obviously, there will always be something huge that will worry you, is something bigger and something more dangerous in the future or whatever. But I remember thinking, that doesn't even affect me anymore. And it was really through compounding actions. Like, I have as part of me morning routine, like, I have a very strict morning routine. Like, for me, Jocko Willink said something one time. He's a Navy SEAL commander and a leadership expert now. Discipline equals freedom. And a lot of people think it's the opposite of that freedom comes from doing what you want. But for me, discipline equals freedom. And that means with my morning routine, which is mindfulness, affirmations, gratitude practice, visualization, from being very disciplined about that practice, I'm very positive in the day, I'm very energized in the day, and I'm very focused in the day, and I'm very much more aware during the day. And that gives me the freedom to be physically healthy, to be aware of my financial situation, to make the right decisions in my life, to have more clarity in my life. And it's those compounding actions of having a morning routine, of journaling, of thinking in that way and triggering myself and cueing myself every single day. Them actions have compounded, and they've just given me so much energy, joy, clarity in my life, confidence in my life, an ability to know where I'm going, what I'm doing. And it's really compounding actions as well of the program that I developed for my own life. I'm always looking for tools and tactics and habits that will help me in my life, and that will help me to share my message with other people, to help others in their life, to show people that change is possible and that they can do it too. And by compounding them actions and always looking for tools and tactics, like having this chat with you now, you've asked me a couple of questions I've never been asked before, and I'd say I'm going to be reflecting on that later now and thinking about what other tools and tactics I can get out of this. And it's that compounding action that just really, you're always building, you're always learning, you're always growing. And if you stay consistent to that kind of a mindset, all of your actions will always compound. And if you stay aware and on the game and on the ball, all of them actions will be good actions. And the compounding effect of that can be actually extraordinary in my experience anyway.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think the self-awareness before the consistent action is probably key, because in my own life, I found that what stops you from consistent action is the bad feelings, taking them for reality, and like not realizing you can act and do things in spite of not feeling the best and whatever. So that's the key for me to consistency, is to act even though you don't feel like showing up. You just act and just do it every day. And that's belief.
Yeah, do it anyway. Yeah, just show up.
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Another thing I'm curious about too is the delusion. So you're talking a little bit about when you're going through the heroin addiction, you were deluding yourself. So how difficult was it to face the delusion, and then what was the freedom like on the other side of facing the delusion?
Right, that was a breakthrough moment for me. So I used to think of myself in addiction as a clever schemer. I was a clever addict. I was a schemer, and I done a lot of illegal activities. I was selling drugs for years to feed me habit. I was robbing to do stuff. I was always scheming and looking for ways to make money. And I thought I was a clever sort of very clever person. And I lied. With addiction comes lies, because you're not going to tell your family, oh, I'm off to have a hit of heroin. Like, it's just, you're sort of forced to lie to an extent if you're going to keep up with your addiction. But what I didn't realize was that I was, the biggest lies were to myself. I was always lying to myself. And the big one was I didn't believe I was a real addict. I was bloody taking heroin every day for pretty much 15 years. I was doing methadone every day for 12 years. And then tablets. Like, I was taking an extraordinary amount of drugs, but I convinced myself I wasn't a real addict. I remember one time, me and my friend, a good friend of mine who was still in addiction, we had I shouldn't be laughing about it maybe, but it's funny. We had this weekend in my house called the Smackathon, like a marathon smack sessions. We called it the Smackathon. And we stayed in my house. This was in our early days of getting addicted. And we stayed in my house for 2 days straight. We got loads and loads of heroin, and we had a bloody time of our lives. Let's be honest about it. At the times before we were like really bad on the stuff. And I remember saying I told everyone I was going to Galway for that weekend, so nobody'd be looking for me and we could be in my house and stuff like that. So we just spent the 2 days in the house, and I remember telling people, I was in Galway for a weekend. Oh yeah, it was great. We done this, we done that. And then I remember just that story went on, and I used to tell people generally when it was nothing to do with the Smackathon or the heroin or anything like that. I used to tell people about these stories in Galway. I remember I used to just think I was in Galway. I just thought I was in Galway. I was never in bloody Galway. But I believed I was in Galway just from the lies I told other people, believed myself, and just thought these things. But the real moment came when I was in treatment down in Asherie, and I was like a little child, like that madness again. Like, I was like a little child learning about the world again. And I wanted my phone. I wanted to have music and stuff like that. And other people in the house, I wanted to show them pictures of my phone. I was like a little child having a tantrum, to be quite honest, because I couldn't have my phone. And I told my sister on a family day. I told my brother, because I knew my sister would say, no way is that happening. I told my younger brother, I says, I'm allowed to have my phone. Can you give it to me? So my sister copped onto this. She says, no, he's talking crap. There's no way can you have his phone in the treatment centre. And gave it to the counsellor. And the counsellor called me in and he says, Brian, I believe you're telling your family you could have your phone for the last week, and there's no way, like, you can get kicked out of treatment for having a phone, because for obvious reasons you could call a drug dealer or stuff like that. And I remember just off the cuff, I was like, Dave, his name was, says, Dave, I can't believe my sister just told you that. He says, you know what that is, Dave? Says, this is their last opportunity to come down here and hammer into me and say all the stuff about me, that I'm this and I'm that. That's our last opportunity to dig the knife in. And I didn't believe that at all. That was just me spewing out of my mouth just to get myself out of a situation. That's what I'd done. I was a compulsive liar just to get myself out of situations, and I was pretty good at it as well. And I was like, I can't believe it, Dave. Like, the key part of being a good lawyer, you have to believe your own lawyers as well. Because if you believe it, you're going to be very convincing. So I didn't do it on purpose, but that's what kind of happened. And I remember saying, Dave, I can't believe she done that. Says, but you know, I hear about Dave, it doesn't surprise me because that's the way she is. She just wanted to twist the knife, and she's pretending I wanted my phone. So what would I want my phone for? So that went on. Dave didn't believe a bit of what I said. Anyway, he'd seen all this before. But I walked out of that room and I walked down the corridor and I said to myself, I can't believe my sisters had to do that to me. But you know what? I caught myself because of the little bit of the shift I had. I caught myself and I says, oh my God, I'm at the spewing out a lie in that 5 minutes ago and walking out and believing that whole lie, even though I knew it was complete bullshit. And I remember saying to myself, oh my God, I'm a master at self-deception. I'm a master of deluding myself into believing my own crap, basically. And I remember from that day, when I went into that treatment centre, the main thing they were saying to me was, Brian, you're going to have to start being honest. You have to be honest. You have to be honest. After that experience in the last week, they were telling me, right, Brian, you can't be brutally honest. Because I was going around saying, the truth will set you free. I'm never going to lie for as long as I live. And I'm going to be blatantly honest about everything because I am a master of deception, my own self-deception. And that was a key moment for me of believing that the truth will set me free. And I have been blatantly honest about everything since then. Now, I'm not going to go and tell someone that they look brutal after a night out or hurt someone deliberately, but I'm just blatantly honest about myself. And I'm always looking for feedback off other people. I always ask people, how do you think I'm deceiving myself? Even a question I ask myself most mornings would be, how am I going to deceive myself today? And I'm always on the lookout for how I'm trying to delude myself into ways of thinking, cognitive biases that we have, because we're all deluding ourselves to an extent. It's just really catching that, you know?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about cognitive biases? Because they help me as well to realize that the brain has you've got a distorted perception of reality. It's your job to kind of like minimize those distortions and stuff. Just talk a bit about mental models and cognitive biases. How do they help you on your path?
Okay, so mental models, that's one of my new things. I'm obsessed with mental models at the moment. Did you read my article on mental models?
Yeah, I did, yeah. I've come across mental models before, Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett.
They're very cool. Yeah. And for me, and I suppose they really go hand in hand, don't they? Mental models is really to see reality clearly is the key piece. The cognitive bias that jumped out on me, there was two. I think it was the fundamental attribution error. It was one of the biases that we do where we attribute behaviors to the person rather than the environment. And that's called the fundamental attribution error. And I remember hearing a study that if people were in a classroom and somebody was throwing like bits of popcorn at the lecturer and he wasn't able to concentrate and he looked sort of nervous, people would attribute that to him as being having a nervous disposition. Whereas it was nothing got to do with that. People were like bothering him really badly, like, you know. And it's just we tend to blame the person internally rather than the external problem. So that was a big bias that jumped out at me. But then the other bias was confirmation bias, that we tend to believe information we already know. So if you're a racist, let's say, and you see a white person doing good things, you'll say, oh yeah, I'll confirm that. Yeah, white people always do good things. But if you see a white person doing some violent stuff or something like that, you'd sort of ignore that information. Whereas it'd be the opposite if you're a racist against black people, let's say. If you see them doing something bad, you say, oh, typical, isn't it? Or if you see them doing something good, you'd say, you'd ignore that. So we confirm what we know and ignore what doesn't agree with our pre-existing biases. And there was a couple of other biases as well. I just thought the way when I learned about attention and heuristics and shortcuts our brain takes, because the world is so full of information that we have these biases that just grabs the stuff we do know. That's what got me interested in trying to see the world clearly. And that's why I'm so interested in asking people questions to give me greater self-awareness, because I know I delude myself a lot through my own behaviours, my own learned behaviour of doing that, and the way the world is set up with biases and our brains are set up. And I suppose the mental models I use around that would be, there's a couple of mental models that, I suppose the mental models that I think of mental models in a different way. I suppose I use meditation to get greater awareness and ask questions, and journaling techniques for that. The mental models I would think about just to see the world a little bit more clearly would be really just models that make the world simpler. The biggest model I always use, and I think it's a groundbreaking model for all other mental models, is the Pareto principle, which simply states that 80% of our gains come from 20% of our efforts. And I won't go into the depths of that. If you can give a link maybe if you can go, for anyone who's listening, you can go to my website. They'll actually find a link for that there about mental models and the Pareto principle. But it's really brilliant to see that, like, we could be wasting our time on 80% of our work that's getting no gains, that we should really focus on the 20% that gives us all our gains. And that would really be the same for our happiness, and it's even the same for our mental models. So I done an 80-20 analysis on the mental models that I learned, and I really utilized the 20% that give me the most gain. And they're the mental models that I use more than any others. So the other mental models I use will be inversion, which is simply to invert the problem in any way. The Occam's razor, just always look for the simplest solution to things. So the great one of that is, I remember talking to Adam Robinson about that. Adam Robinson's an amazing guy from America. And he was saying, if you hear hoofbeats behind you, think horses, not unicorns. I thought that was brilliant. Think of the simplest solution to reality rather than going into the depths of things. And then you have things like force principles from Elon Musk, where it's just get rid of the underlying assumptions that we always have. And I suppose this could really fit into the stuff that I was talking about self-deception and deluding ourselves as well. Sometimes you trust the rules that have served us in the past. Like a rule that I used was, drugs make me feel better. They didn't. They made me feel better years and years and years ago, but they soon stopped me making feel better. But that's a rule that served me, an assumption for my life that I had that was actually nearly killing me. But if we break things down to force principles, which is another model that Elon Musk used to be super successful, is, right, are they? Let's say I've never done this before on my own addiction. Actually, we'll try to break this down to force principles. So, how does drugs affect your physical body? They make you worse. How does lying to yourself make you think that will delude yourself? How does living in a world of lies, what impact will that have? It'll force you away from other people that you love. So if I broke that down to its force principles of that behavior, what I was actually doing, I was just creating a false world where it wouldn't work. But the assumption I went on and the belief that I went on, which wasn't grounded in force principles, is drugs make me feel better. It's suppose that's a nice way of looking at mental models. I might use that for the future, but it's another great mental model. I'm missing one of my favorite mental models, and I don't know which one it is. Sure. I'll think of it in a second. It'll come back to me.
That's really good the way you highlighted that there. It's like, if you've got a flawed assumption to begin with, then all the logic is going to be based off of flawed assumptions, so all the logic is going to be flawed too.
Yeah, definitely.
So how was, like, a multidisciplinary approach helped you to understand life better?
A multidisciplinary approach. For me, and this is really important for me at the moment, and the multidisciplinary approach. So I would have been very tunnel vision minded, let's say. If I get something that works for me, when I got into psychology, it wasn't psychology that worked for me. It was behavioral psychology, functional psychology, and everything else was wrong. Then when I got into, I started seeing the world a little bit more clearly, and I started expanding my horizons. And I was like, oh no, everything has its place, and it's context dependent. And I seen the gains, I seen the advantages of cognitive psychology and neuroscience, but that was still all in the realm of psychology. But I was still all about psychology. But then the more I started expanding my horizons again, like now that I'm starting my own business, I'm looking at all different aspects of it. I need to be good at sales. I'm very interested in marketing at the moment. I'm very interested in psychology. I always will be, and mental health and stuff like that. But the multidisciplinary approach is really important because we pull the world apart, and sometimes we forget that the world is a whole. Like psychology doesn't happen in a vacuum. Psychology happens in the real world, but we use language and we use these labels to define reality in a way that allows us to communicate it and allows us to make sense to us. But we have to put these things back into the unified whole to make sense of the world. So I think Charlie Munger came up with the idea that it's a lattice work of mental models helps you to see the world better. And a lattice work's like an interconnected spiel of loads of different threads, or metal work of lattice work. It's just like a jigsaw kind of a thing, overlaying each other. And really, you need to learn about all these different disciplines. Like, so for example, supply and demand is a mental model from the economics. And it's a simple mental model, is that in the basic, the way cost and what things are valued is based on supply and demand. So when I'm setting up a business now around marketing, I would have to use, right, what will work, and what tools and tactics and what stuff I'm going to put in the book has to sell. People are going to have to want to read it. So it's based on supply and demand. But then I'm going to have to use the psychology of that as well. And the tools and tactics I use around psychology. And it's all, you have to use all the different disciplines. Now that marketing has become a big part of my life, I'm going to be writing a book. I'm going to be designing a program. I'm going to start master classes on mental models and stress reduction in companies and stuff like that. And I'm going to have to be able to market these things. And so marketing is another discipline that I'm going to have to learn about as well, but it's all interconnected. We all have to put them together at the end of the day if we want to put these things into practice. A great thing on marketing as well is, which really fits into that as well, I'd be very much in the Seth Godin line of marketing. And he just says marketing is influencing people to change with empathy. And I love the with empathy part. And that comes, I suppose, from the Buddhist perspective of things. That's another discipline, or another way of looking at the world, is compassion-centered marketing, or empathic marketing. Now you're looking to change people's worlds, where some people would think of marketing as a negative thing, like advertising and all these kinds of things, but it's not. I'm going to be looking to market my products, which are going to be looking to help people's mental health and help people to personal growth, to grow in a way that of the tactics that I've found in my own life that have worked. And I'm going to have to use these tactics, marketing strategies, to influence people, to show them that they work. But with empathy is the key part, to keep that in mind. So you're always thinking of the other. It always comes back to other people at the end of the day, you know. It's another discipline, I suppose, way of looking at things.
Mm. So you see a distinction between transformation and information?
And sorry, the second one?
Like transformation and information. Do you see any differences there between
transformation and information?
In the way you go about, in the way you approach learning. Like you could approach learning from like an information gathering point of view and try and learn all the information, or you can approach it more from a transformative, applying in the real world, seeing it for yourself kind of approach.
Yeah, massive difference for me there, and it's something we touched on again, Dennis, beforehand, isn't it? It's really experiential learning, and I suppose it's acting on it. I think it's what's his name? Jeez, I'm forgetting a lot of things tonight. Feynman is was a great, but yeah, the Feynman principle. But he says he has this quote that I love. It's like, I don't know how people learn. He says people learn in a very strange way, through rote or something. It's so strange. How can you learn anything without acting? And it's that experiential piece. It's acting on the stuff. And for me, it's only through action that you really, really learn. You internalize things. I remember reading about mental models, for example, and it wouldn't stick. It just wouldn't stick. And it's only by using mental models that I'm able to grab a component that I was very confident of breaking up that belief that I had about addiction and breaking it down into first principles, because I've done that on several occasions. I've used first principles on many occasions to break down other things. So I've internalized that mental model because I've been transformed through the use. That's where the transformation happened. I've been transformed through the use of that, through that experiential learning in the past. Whereas if I learned that just through information, which there was a book I was reading lately. The book, what was the book? Oh, the book was it's a great book called Made to Stick. Fantastic book about ideas that are made to stick. And he was that guy, I forget the author's name. He was talking about the course of knowledge. And it's just, there's so much knowledge out there, and that's where the ego comes in. People talk about things in such fancy ways, and information overload, and you don't really learn anything because you're not putting stuff into practice. You're not really understanding it. I think to learn, to know is to do, is to be able to act on the stuff, and to be really, and that's only when you internalize stuff, and that's where transformation really occurs. Like, you could have someone meditate that could describe the depths of meditation, the neuroscience of meditation, but if they don't meditate and see the gains of that practice, they don't really know meditation, for me. And that's the same for any actions, really, anything complicated anyway.
Yeah, I think that's the way to simplify the complex. Otherwise, you're like, it's kind of like you're not seeing the branch. You're not seeing like the trunk of the tree. You're just seeing the leaves, and there's nothing touching off of. That's
Great way. I love that. It's a great way to put it, actually. Yeah,
It
love
is
that.
it simplifies things a bit better. But again, I think
Yeah,
it comes back to because it's I do find with real learning there's a lot of uncomfortable emotions that come up from like going outside your comfort zone and doing new things and putting yourself in new situations. That I think that self awareness helps again of like disidentification from the labels and the emotions that you think are you. That it allows
yeah,
that freedom to just do things more, accept the emotions, learn, transform. That's yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Cool, man. So, do you have any final message for somebody who is maybe going through a tough time right now? Maybe they could be on the verge of their rock bottom. Who knows? Do you have any kind of words of encouragement for somebody who's going through dark times right now?
Yeah, and for me, it's always the same message, especially for people that are really, really struggling. Because for myself, it's getting that chink in the armor. It's really people could hear me talking about PhD, mental models, and all this kind of stuff. Well, when I was back, or meditation for that matter, when I was back in the day in my own stuff, I just I was so disjointed from that kind of talk, or so far away from anything like that. It just wouldn't have made sense. And for me, the takeaway message I'd really always come back to is it's just baby steps to be a key piece, right? It's you got to take action and you got to be consistent. But the key part of that is you've got to take baby steps. That's the action at first, because you're setting yourself up for failure if you try to. And a lot of people do this. They try to make these big grandiose leaps. Let's say at the start of the new year, I'm going to join a gym. I'm going to eat super healthy. I'm going to be a vegan and all these kinds of things. I'm going to meditate for half an hour a day. And you're just setting yourself up for failure, because the way the brain works and the way the human mind works is the habits are very hard to break. Bad habits are very, very hard to break, but by default, good habits are very, very hard to break too. So if you start with baby steps, start with meditation, a minute a day. Meditate while listening to a favorite song. Make it rewarding for yourself, but do it every single day. Set up your environment as well. That's a key piece, because it's when you're trying to set up new habits, it's very easy to forget that you're doing it. All of a sudden, a week can pass. You say, "Oh my God, I forgot I was supposed to keep them habits going." So set your environment up in a certain way. Like, let's say if you want to meditate for 3 minutes in the evening time, put something on your bed at the start of the day. So when you go to sleep, go to bed that night, there's something sitting there to give you a reminder. If you want to eat healthier, get rid of the crappy food out of your house. Like, so if the cues are there, you will eat crappy food. That's just a fact. So it's really set up your environment in a way to keep them habits going, but start with baby steps. That's the key piece for me. Like, there's a great website called Medium, and there's loads of inspirational articles on that website. And I think inspirational articles are great. Like, if anyone listening to this goes to my website, I write a lot about all my different tools. I actually, there's 9 tactics that I use to change my life as well. If you go to my website, you'll get a free download of that program as well. So there's a lot of them little tactics, but don't go reading the whole program. Read one of the little tactics, or read one of the articles, and it leads you onto other articles that other people write as well. And it's that inspirational kind of stuff. Read an inspirational quote once every day, but little steps, small steps, and with consistent action. And we were talking about it earlier on, it's that compounding action over time can have an extraordinary impact on your life. But don't get disheartened if you're not seeing the gain straight away, because you can't see the gain straight away. You have to keep on doing it and believe in the process, believe in the work, and it really does. The gains will come, and it's life-changing over time. But start small, but start and keep on going. That'd be the message.
Message. Where's the best place to find you online and to find you in general?
In general, yeah, I think I just said my website without giving the name of the website. So my website is brianpennie.com. It's Brian, BRIAN, PENNIE.com. So that's where people will find me, and then I'm on all social media websites. So I share my content across all the social media: Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Quora. I have a site on Quora as well. I have a lot of followers on Quora. It's a sort of simple tools and tactics to simplify your life. So I'm on a lot of them, but they'll really find me primarily on my website. And if you want to follow me, just look for Brian Pennie. There's only Pennie, PENNIE. There's only really one of me out there, I think. So they'll find me handy enough. But and I share all the content that I talk about. So that's what I'm really about at the end of the day.
Perfect. Good stuff, Brian. Thanks again for taking the time today and sharing your story. I think that from listening to you, I really enjoyed listening, like the journey you went on. And I think you're a great example of somebody, just for anybody, that change is possible if you put your mind to it and you take daily consistent steps. start seeing through your bullshit. And
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
possible for everybody. So yeah, thanks again, Brian.
Brilliant. And thanks so much, Dennis. You've asked some fantastic questions. You really got me thinking on a few pieces. I took a few notes myself of things I need to reflect on myself. And it's always about learning at the end of the day. Like I've learned so much just from the great questions you've asked as well. So thanks so much for that. Thanks for having me.
Cool. So until next time, have fun and enjoy the process.